Hey guys, so in this quick tutorial I'm going to talk a little bit about using press molds. They are molds that you can, by the name implies, press into to create forms, and it does allow you to work quickly on multiple forms. You can also press into things you might have around the house like a bowl, or you can even press over it, like with a slab over the bowl. But the thing you have to remember to do is put some sort of release on it, like a sheet of plastic works great. But what I have here is I have this plaster press mold that I made forever ago. I have a big one and then I have a little one. And both of these are just simple plaster that I put in first I had a box, and then I put a ball in it, a rubber ball in it, and I poured plaster around it. So I would have these perfectly round forms that I can press the clay into. And the reason you use plaster is super porous. So plaster is going to suck the water out of your clay, and it's going to make it stiffen up really quickly and allows you to pull it out of there. It's not going to adhere to it. It's not going to stick to it. So you don't need any kind of release. So you literally could just press into this, let it sit for a minute, and then pull it out. And what I get from that is this perfect half sphere. Nice and easy, and it's really quick for me, and it's really consistent. You could pinch this as well, but it's not going to be quite as consistent. It's not quite as quick for me. So if I know I want to be doing multiples, I use my press mold. I also have this press mold right here that I made by basically creating a ribbon or a round or what do you want to call it, a coil, right? And I made this form out of clay. I cut it in half, and I slapped that down on a board. I built a wall of clay around it, and I put a release on it, which I used for this. I used Vaseline, and then I poured plaster over it, and it was a two-part. It's not a slip casting mold, but it is a two-part mold. So I have the right side and the left side, which is why when I made it, I first made my positive out of clay, just soft clay. Then I cut it in half. I laid the two halves down on a board, built a wall of clay around it, and then I poured plaster around it. And what I do is then I take a coil and I carefully press the coil into this negative space, right? And then I dig the clay out so it can be hollow. I let that sit. I do the very same thing on this side. So I press a coil of clay, really pressing it in there. I dig out a channel so that it's hollow, and I let that sit a little bit until it gets nice and set up so I can pull it out. And then I take those two parts and I slip and score them together, and I get this guy. And so it allows me to make multiples of this same object relatively quickly. It is still kind of a difficult form because of the curves, but I can make a production line of these pretty easily. So that's the benefit of using a press mold, is it does allow for speed and consistency. So what I'm going to show you now is how I used it to make this half sphere. I'm going to make a second one, and then what it comes together to be is the body, in this case for this little piggy, but it could literally be the body for any kind of round sphere. And I'll also show you what I did with this tiny one, this small little circle, which I can crank these out super quick, and I'm using it to build this guy right here, which is going to be a, I don't know, multi-bumpy vase thingy. How's that for a description? So I have it sitting right here. All right, so let's start with this one. I'm going to adjust my camera down. So you can see here what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this slab of clay that I cut off with my wire cutter, right? I'm going to get it started because it's going to go into here. So why not do a little work beforehand? I've got more clay than I need, but I'd rather have more than less so I don't have to add to it, and I won't have a natural break in the clay that could introduce the opportunity for a crack or a tear. So what I'm just doing is I'm sort of starting to form it into a basic shape that what it's going to become. And I'm stretching in the way because this is a circle, and I'm starting with a square because the way it comes out of the bag. So I'm kind of stretching it to be a circle. Be mindful that I'm still keeping a fairly even thickness. I don't want to have areas that are super thin and other areas that are super thick. So I'm just simply working it like this, kind of the way that we pinch, going around and around, because it's going to go in. And when I'm ready, we're just going to take it and we're going to gently push it in there. And we're going to do basically that same process of compressing it down into it, and I'm making sure I'm really pushing it down there with my thumb and pressing against the wall. And it's okay that I have too much because I can cut it off. I was a little bit generous in the amount that I started with, but I can recycle the clay or I can use it for slip later. So what I'm doing is I'm just really pressing right in there with my thumb consistently across the entire interior surface. Notice I'm rotating it as I go to compress the clay, to get a nice even wall. And as I'm moving in a circle, I'm working from the bottom up. So I'm starting at the bottom, doing a 180 turn or a 360 turn, and then I'm going up a thumb, literally a thumb length, and continuing until I get to the very top. I'm going to leave a little of this extra clay because the idea is that this half is going to go onto this half, so I'm going to need a little bit of extra to help join it. You can always remove clay. It's harder to add clay, in my opinion. It's easier to remove it. So I'd rather err on the side of too much than too little. But I am going to trim off some of this stuff. And I'm just going to set it aside. It gives me a little better sense of how much extra clay I have. Okay, trimming off that excess. I'll do one more pass because I think it's a little thick compared to my first one, which is really quite thin. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave this in here because this clay is really, really soft. And so if I pull it out right now, it's going to probably either tear or it's just going to not hold the form. So what I did is I made one before, right? So this guy's actually getting pretty dry because it's been sitting out for a while. So because the idea is I'm going to combine these two, I'm actually going to cover this one with plastic for a little bit until this one has a chance to set up. When I'm working at home, I actually have two of these. So I would work, I do two at once, let them sit for maybe, I'm just trying to see you guys, hi. Maybe let it sit for about 15, 20 minutes, test it, see how it looks, and then I'll pull them apart. So I'm pausing right now because some students are here. Hi, in our RRL. You're going to see this in the tutorial. Pause. I'll put my mask on for you. Oops, that all is in the recording. Okay, starting up again. We have two students here dropping off work, and the work looks amazing, so that's very exciting. Let's finish up what we were doing here. So I have this mold setting up. It's just going to hang out for a little bit. Its friend, its other half, is here waiting for me to put the two of them together. It's going to hang out. I actually have a water bottle. I'm going to spray it a little bit because things are starting to get a little dry. It's pretty warm today, actually. And then what I have here is my little guy that I've been pressing into to make these little lumpies that are going to build onto this right here. So it's going to look something like this when I get done. So to make those, all I do is take my little guy and I take my clay, same thing, I just force it in there with my thumb. I'm always working in circular motions. and always with both hands. In this case, I'm not necessarily two hands on the clay, but I am two hands on my object. So it's super fast. Bring that thing out. And I'm actually using some clay that was sitting out, so it's a little bit drier, so I was hoping to be able to pull it right out. Yep, so I've got that little form. And so I already have 1, 2, I'm just gonna keep doing that. Initially I sat down and I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for this piece to be done, it's probably gonna need close to 16 of these, which is why this mold helps out, because I can do them really pretty quickly. And again, what I'm really shooting for is making sure that my walls are basically the same thickness. They're not too heavy on the bottom, they're not too heavy at the top, they're all relatively the same. This clay is a little bit soft, but I think I can, yeah, I have to reshape it a little bit after it pulled out. So theoretically, I'd either work with slightly drier clay, or I'd work in stages. I'd work on this, I put one in here, do one more. Because what's happening, I'm going to remind you again why I like working with plaster, is that the plaster is porous. So the plaster pulls the water out of the clay and lets it set up farther, and it gets it to that nice leather hard stage faster, and so it holds the form so that I can build with it. And that's the goal. I wanted to get it to a place where I can easily start building it, hand building it into the form. So I'm going to let this sit over here. So I'm just stacking up a little army of these little guys that will then be added to this. But see, it's too squishy right now, so I have to let it set up a little bit more. But the idea is it'll go on like here, another one will go here, and here, and I'll show you guys the finished piece once I get it done. So the purpose of these molds is to speed up my work time and to allow me to make multiples of the same form that are consistent. So let's check in on this guy. Still a little too squishy. Well, might be able to get it out. Yep, okay. So you can see it comes out like this, nice clean. And then what we'll do, I did get a little bit, because I pulled out a little bit too early. What we'll do is we'll trim it, put these two together to make that perfect cylindrical ball, which then becomes the body of this guy. So if you want to make these at home, if you want to make, sorry, I accidentally stopped the recording, but I was going to say, if you want to make molds of your own, you can get plaster at Home Depot. You can also get it for free at Art Center. Just check in on how you go about doing that. Or you can use a bowl, a plastic bowl, or any kind of bowl, but if you're going to press into it, if you use something that's not plaster, it will stick to the sides, so you won't be able to pull it out. So just line it with a sheet of plastic, or fabric would work too. Plastic works really nicely, so that when you can let it set up, and then you can lift it out of there. Okay, I hope you found this. This is probably not one of my best videos, but I hope you found it informative, and I'll see you next week in class. Look, there's your classmates are lurking around behind me. Bye.